An American cinematic icon for all time, Jodie Foster was one of the bravest and brightest legends to ever grace the silver screen. The young genius who stunned audiences worldwide in Taxi Driver and played the role of the unyielding Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs. Not only will her name live on in cinematic legend, but it will also be ingrained in the very fabric of world civilization. Coming from a family defined by hardship and absence, she rose to become an inspiration, a courageous voice for generations, and the proud owner of 2 Oscars. She transcended the realm of acting thanks to her unparalleled intelligence, magnetic personality, and unwavering dignity. Being a living example that brilliance knows no age, she became the story in and of itself. However, a battlefield of terrible wounds lies beneath that glittering splendor. Times when she felt her life hanging precariously in the balance, and the terrors that plagued her for 40 years. At last she felt at peace again, right when everyone else thought the storm had passed. At the age of 62, there was a dramatic change that shocked fans to no end. You will be deeply saddened by Jodie Foster's situation. As a tribute to a life full of storms, please like this before we begin. Red carpets and Academy Awards were not the starting points of Jodie Foster's life. It all started with tragedy. Her father had disappeared before she was born, and her mother was a single parent juggling 4 children in a rundown house in Los Angeles. On November 19, 1962, Jodie came into this planet. Among Cindy, Connie, and Buddy, he is the youngest. Lucius Foster, her father and a real estate broker who had a decorated military career, abandoned his pregnant mother. Evelyn Brandy Foster had the unenviable task of raising 4 children on her own, all while battling for survival in a cramped house where the only resource available was sacrifice. There was an enduring stillness within her as a result of her father's absence, a hidden scar that permeated her entire formative years. Brandy spared her children the pitiful fate of financial ruin by bestowing onto them an item of greater worth: intelligence, bravery, and perseverance. Oh, and Jod was like a lightning rod soaking up all the information. Even at the tender age of 9 months she was babbling well. She succeeded in teaching herself to read by the age of 3. At the age of 4 she was already devouring literature that were much too advanced for her. The doctors were astounded by her genius. Teachers mumbled something about being talented. Her little sister spoke with an air of uncharacteristic poise and confidence, captivating even her elder siblings. Joe, a family friend, gave her the moniker Jodie, which quickly became more common than her given name, Alicia Christian Foster, as though fate were reshaping her very being. But there is always a cost to brilliance. Practicing for an audition and rehearsal replaced what should have been playground fun. My youth was vanishing even before it started. Years down the road, Jod would confess with devastating honesty, "I never really had a childhood. I was working before I knew what play meant." This confession unveiled the tragic fact that genius had been born from sacrifices too heavy for a child to bear. A talent scout cast Jod in a sunscreen commercial in 1965 when she was only 3 years old. Across the United States, the picture of a young girl whose swimsuit was tugged at by a puppy became instantly recognizable. Unfortunately, a horrible truth lay behind that charming picture. Her status as a child had evolved. Because of her, the family could afford to eat. During the subsequent 18 months, she made an appearance in nearly 30 advertisements, her image appearing everywhere, while her innocence subtly faded. A trust fund had to be set up to hold her earnings because she had already surpassed her mother's earnings by the time she was 4 years old. Instead of letting herself be carried away by the joy of kite chasing at the park, the small girl had to bear the immense burden of survival. Her television career began at the tender age of 5 with Mayberry RFD, and by the time she was 13 years old she had guest starred on more than 50 series. The producers couldn't believe she kept working so hard despite being sick with a fever and so exhausted. However, the reality was harsh. This was not voluntary self-control. It has to be done. Foster commented on her childhood, saying, "I was always the adult in the room even when I was just a little girl." Her family's dynamic was one of sacrifice, and she had to be brilliant to survive. Jodie Foster grew up without a father's hug. Performance supplanted play. She wore the crown and the cross of innocence by obligation and brilliance. Jodie Foster was subjected to unprecedented pressure from Hollywood in 1972. She was invited to work side by side with a trained lion on the set of Napoleon and Samantha. Suddenly, a terrifying incident occurred during what was supposed to be a lovely time. She hurt her back and side after falling victim to the animal's erratic movements. In an effort to keep her safe, the team wasted no time securing the set. Aside from the obvious bodily harm, the accident also left her with long-term anxieties that kept popping up in her dreams. Jode would later recall softly, "I had nightmares about that lion for a long time. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing it, and yet only 3 days later, she returned to the set wrapped in bandages, but determined to finish the film. That image, standing before the camera while still healing, was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Hollywood applauded her professionalism. But beneath the applause lay a difficult truth. This was not bravery by choice, it was resilience demanded by circumstance. The following year, while filming Tom Sawyer, another setback came. During a stunt, Jodie fell and broke her wrist. The pain was sharp, but she refused to abandon the role. She pressed on, masking the ache behind a smile, learning how to transform hardship into performance. The camera captured a lively Becky Thatcher, but behind the lens was an actor enduring far more than anyone should at such an early stage of life. These were not just accidents. They were quiet lessons that in Hollywood, performance often stood above protection. The recovery took time, but the emotional memory endured. The price of a career shaped beneath the relentless studio lights. Then came 1976, and with it the role that would both immortalize her and deepen her shadows. Director Martin Scorsese cast Jodie as Iris in Taxi Driver, a character placed in a mature, challenging story world. Before filming, Jodie underwent hours of psychological evaluation as experts considered whether she could carry such weight. The California Labor Board enforced strict safeguards, and for the most sensitive moments, her older sister Connie stepped in to shield her from the heaviest burdens of the script. Even so, the toll was real. What unsettled her most was not the dialogue or the intensity of the story, but the wardrobe choices. Some conflicted with her comfort and well-being, pushing her to the edge of tears. Years later, she admitted, "I would hold back tears because I had to wear those ridiculous costumes." When the film premiered, the world hailed her brilliance. Jodie Foster received an Academy Award nomination, with critics praising her as an old soul in a young performer. Stunned by the depth she carried to the screen, Taxi Driver brought glory, but it also left shadows that time could never fully erase. Jodie Foster's rise to the summit of Hollywood was not a golden staircase, but a relentless climb where every step was marked by exhaustion, fear, and sacrifice. After the storm of her teenage years, when Disney comedies like Freaky Friday brought her box office smiles and darker films like The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane demanded a maturity far beyond her age, it was clear that childhood was already gone. She was celebrated as versatile, yet the price was steep, and adolescence exchanged for roles that aged her spirit long before her time. By the late 1970s, her talent carried her across oceans, to France for Mua, Fleur Bleue, and to Italy for Casoto. She acted in languages not her own, sang songs for foreign audiences, and played orphans and con artists in films like Kanchu. The applause was there, but behind the curtain was loneliness. A teenager far from home, she carried herself like an adult. Later admitting that the early years had left her feeling older than she was, as if the innocence of youth had been stolen and replaced with a forced resilience. Then came the moment that should have defined only tragedy, not her life. The 1981 incident involving President Ronald Reagan, carried out by an individual who later claimed it was connected to her. Jodie had nothing to do with it. Yet overnight she became a symbol trapped under relentless headlines. At Yale she lived under federal protection. Agents outside her dorm room, reinforced glass in her windows, and a phone line connected directly to the FBI. She once confessed that she nearly quit school 17 times during that first year, crushed by the weight of fear and intrusion. Even on stage, danger found her. A security incident in the audience left her shaken so deeply that she stepped away from theater for 4 decades. At an age when others were discovering freedom, Jodie lived under intense restrictive security, her youth reshaped by forces far beyond her control. By 1985 she graduated magna laude, her thesis on Toni Morrison, proving her brilliance beyond the screen. Yet Hollywood had turned its back. Casting directors labeled her a commercial risk. 63 auditions brought almost nothing. Finished films were shelved, and her savings dwindled to almost nothing. She endured therapy 3 times a week, not from weakness but because survival demanded it. For someone once hailed as a prodigy, to be told she was finished before even 30 was a cruelty few could endure. Then came The Accused. For 7 months, director Jonathan Kaplan fought for her when studios insisted she was not bankable. The role of Sarah Tobias was not glamorous. She was scarred, imperfect, raw. Jodie poured her own pain into Sarah, channeling every rejection, every scar, every invasion of her youth. When she stood on the Oscar stage in 1989, holding the golden statue at only 26, it was not just a triumph of talent. It was the redemption of a soul that had been told it was unworthy. It was not just about winning, she later said softly. It was about being allowed to exist again. 2 years later came The Silence of the Lambs. As Clarice Starling, she was no glamorous heroine, but a young woman clawing her way through fear, trauma, and male-dominated halls of power. Jodie trained tirelessly with the FBI, studied criminal profiling, practiced with real agents, even put her body through exhausting drills, all while carrying the weight of the role's intensity. The film became legend, and in 1992 she won her second Oscar at 29. Critics called Clarice the greatest heroine in cinema history. Yet for Jodie, the glory was tempered by exhaustion. She had carried darkness again, worn its weight like armor, and though the world called it brilliance, she knew it was carved out of scars that had never fully healed. By the mid-1990s, at the very peak of fame, she refused to rest. She directed Little Man Tate, a mirror of her own childhood genius, while juggling a punishing schedule. For Nell in 1994, she immersed herself to the point of physical strain, isolating in the mountains, inventing a new language, enduring freezing waters, losing weight to transform into a woman untouched by society. The performance brought acclaim and another Oscar nomination, but Jodie admitted later that coming back to ordinary life felt almost impossible. She founded Egg Pictures soon after, determined to tell stories of women, solitude, and resilience, themes etched into her own soul. This was Jodie Foster's pinnacle, not simply awards and applause, but survival. Every Oscar, every standing ovation was stained with shadows of loss, fear, and relentless pressure. And yet through every storm she stood, not untouched but unbroken. Her glory was never a fairy tale. It was living proof that greatness can rise not from comfort but from pain, endured, transformed, and carried with grace. Jodie Foster's triumphs on the Oscar stage were dazzling, but when the spotlight dimmed and the applause faded, she longed for something the industry could never give her, a quiet, steady love. That yearning found its answer in 1993 on the set of Summersby, where she met Sydney Bernard, a production coordinator whose calm strength and unshakable kindness felt like a safe harbor after decades of storms. Unlike the red carpets and flashing cameras, their connection was not loud or public. It was quiet, private, and profoundly real. Jodie, weary from years of scrutiny and applause that often felt hollow, finally met someone who saw her not as a prodigy or a legend, but simply as a woman yearning for peace. Sydney grounded me, she once reflected softly. She gave me a sense of home when everything else felt like noise. For Bernard, too, those years shimmered like sunlight on still water. Friends remembered how her eyes lit up whenever Jodie entered a room, how she spoke of her not as an icon but as a partner she admired deeply. In private moments, Sydney once described Jodie as the most fiercely intelligent, yet the most tender soul I had ever known. Together they created a world almost invisible to outsiders, but inside their walls it glowed with warmth. Their laughter filled quiet kitchens where the aroma of simple meals lingered. Their joy echoed in the rituals of love, shared books under dim light, late-night walks with the dogs, whispered plans for the future. To the world, Jodie was a two-time Oscar winner. But to Sydney, and later to their children, she was simply Mom. The birth of their first son, Charlie, in 1998 was, in Jodie's own words, the most profound joy of my life. She carried him herself, slipping into the hospital under an assumed name to protect their sanctuary. 3 years later came Kit, and with him a completeness that seemed eternal. Sydney was always there through sleepless nights, first steps, bedtime stories, the beautiful chaos of family life that transformed their hidden home into a universe of love. Yet motherhood for Jodie was both joy and battle. To shield her children, she paid schools thousands of dollars each year to ban paparazzi from taking their pictures. She changed email addresses constantly, used layers of legal protection, and refused to reveal the identity of the children's father. "My sons will know the truth when they are ready," she once said firmly, "not when the public demands it." For 14 years, theirs was a devotion wrapped in secrecy. Two women raising children with tenderness, guarding their happiness like a fragile flame against a relentless wind. "We were a family," Jodie later recalled simply. "That was all that mattered." But even the strongest walls can turn into cages. The silence they had chosen to protect their love gradually became a weight too heavy to bear. What was formerly a sense of security became to feel like suffocating. Once natural conversations become awkward, quietness replaced the formerly deafening laughter. While Sydney yearned for sunshine and a life less concealed, Jodie erected taller walls driven by her insatiable need for solitude. They were both correct. Still, it became more difficult to close the gap. After being together for almost 15 years, they broke up in 2008. It was devastating for Jodie. She came to realize afterwards that she felt like a whole chapter of her life had been ripped out when she and her partner split up. The pain of Sydney's broken heart was less obvious but no less severe. The love had not gone away entirely, but the quiet had triumphed. Despite the sadness, their unwavering commitment to Charlie and Kit kept them together rather than love. Instead of being cold and distant, they opted to be kind and co-parents. According to Jodie, our children kept us together in the ways that truly mattered. Their love story wasn't ruined by treachery, but rather by the gradual deterioration of secret, tragic results from uncontrollable events. A love that thrived in the secluded spaces of life where one might establish a family and escape the outside world could not withstand the crushing stillness. Maybe that is the most fundamental truth of being human. That true love doesn't necessarily have to endure forever. Sometimes the most beautiful scars are the ones that carve both beauty and sadness into a person's psyche. A poignant reminder that love, even at its darkest hours, was genuine, radiant, and everlasting. Once again cast into the shadows, Jodie clung to her children tightly while she kept the world at arm's length after her 14-year partnership with Sydney Bernard came to an end. Remembering had replaced love, which had been her sanctuary. However, daylight breaks at the end of every night. Finally, a new era started in 2013 with the Golden Globes shining brightly. Decades of silence were broken as Jodie Foster stepped onto that stage to accept the Célèbre award. She refrained from making an obnoxious statement or speaking angrily. On the contrary, her speech exhibited the gentle fragility of someone who has kept a secret from the world for an inordinate amount of time. With a rising smile, she replied, "I already did my coming out 1,000 years ago." Her voice then melted into an indescribable primal sound. If you were a public figure from the time you were a toddler and had to struggle for a life that seemed genuine, you might also cherish privacy very highly. The room came to a complete halt at that instant. It was only another acceptance speech in the eyes of many. It was a sense of freedom for Jodie. There came an abrupt illumination into a life that had been shrouded in secrecy. A year later, that light was even brighter. The talented photographer and actress Alexandra Hedison was secretly married to Jod in 2014. There was no public outcry over their romance. The advice of two women who had experienced joy and sorrow helped it grow in peaceful places. The stability that Alexandra brought, which murmured more of sanctuary than spectacle, complemented Jod's ferocity. Finally, Jod could come out of her shell and stop manipulating her reality to fit the standards of a merciless industry. This union was more than a matrimony. It was a restorative deed. The instant when darkness was replaced by light. In retrospect, Jod received something from Alexandra that she had never truly understood. According to her friends, "Calm down." Their sunny Beverly Hills home, with walls decorated with Hedison's eerily gorgeous pictures, became more than just a residence. A safe haven it was. Every morning started with a peaceful ritual. While Jod reads in the corner, Alexandra makes coffee. The sound of their dogs' pads padding on the floor adds to the ambiance. After supper, Jod's boys Charlie and Kit would join in the hilarity, having matured into fine young men thanks to their mother's unfailing love. No stage directions, no prying eyes, just love and family. Alexandra once said of Jodie, "She carries the weight of the world with such grace. And yet in our home she is simply herself, tender, playful, free." It was not a performance but a life reclaimed. For Jodie, the difference between her first and second great loves was not about intensity but about freedom. With Sydney Bernard she had built a family in silence, shielding her joy from the world's gaze. That love had been real, but it lived behind closed doors, constantly shadowed by secrecy. With Alexandra, she was finally allowed to live openly, without apology, without fear. "Alexandra gave me the courage to breathe in the sunlight," Jodie once shared quietly with a friend. "With her, I don't feel like I'm hiding anymore. I feel like I'm home." Their love was not rebellion but a gentle insistence that happiness does not need permission. Alexandra's art, often exploring themes of visibility and absence, presence and distance, seemed to mirror Jodie's own journey, a life spent balancing what the world demanded to see and what her soul longed to reveal. Together they found equilibrium. Together they chose to appear publicly only when they wished, not because they had to. It was visibility on their own terms, a quiet revolution against the clamor of celebrity culture. And through it all, Jodie remained a mother first. She continued to shield Charlie and Kit from the glare of public life, using pseudonyms in hospitals, paying schools to keep paparazzi at bay, ensuring that her sons could grow up without the burden she had carried since childhood. With Alexandra, she found a partner who respected that devotion, someone who stepped into the role of guide and companion, not replacement. Their blended family became proof that love in all its forms is expansive, resilient, and transformative. Today, Jodie Foster's love story with Alexandra Hades is not etched in tabloid scandals or paparazzi snapshots. It lives instead in the quiet dignity of two women walking side by side, raising children, sharing art, and choosing peace over spectacle. After decades of shadows, Jodie finally stands in the sunlight, not untouched by pain, but healed by love, and perhaps that is the deepest truth her journey offers. That the greatest battles are not fought on grand stages, but won in the quiet of kitchens filled with laughter, in gardens walked hand in hand, in the simple courage of living without disguise. Hers is a love that does not need to shout, because its truth resounds in every choice, every smile, every moment of freedom. And in that quiet, steady glow lies the most profound triumph of all. Not merely to act or to endure or even to succeed, but to finally, simply, and fully be. Love had given Jodie Foster new light through Alexandra Hyson, but even the strongest love cannot shield us from life's final truth, loss. After decades of storms, Jode had finally found a partner, a home, a family unshaken. Yet just as she was learning to breathe freely in the sunlight, life reminded her of its cruelty in ways that cut deeper than any career rejection or public scrutiny ever had. Her father, Lucius Foster, passed in 2016 after years of illness and decline. But the grief was complicated. For Jodie, he had always been more an absence than a presence, a decorated Air Force colonel turned broker who had walked away before she was even born. Their paths crossed only a handful of times in her life. Each encounter polite but distant, marked more by curiosity than intimacy. When the news of his passing reached her through family, it was not the shattering of closeness, but the quiet ache of what never was. She grieved not only for the man but for the missing years, the conversations left unspoken, the father-daughter bond that had never been built. It is a strange kind of mourning, she once reflected, to lose someone who was never really yours to begin with. The pain lingered not in loud cries, but in the silence of unanswered questions, in the shadow of an embrace she had never known. Jodie Foster had always known storms, but nothing could prepare her for 2019 when she lost her mother, Evelyn Brandy Foster, the woman who had carried her through every single one. Brandy was not just a mother, she was both mother and father, the steady hand that held 4 children together after being abandoned. From Jode's earliest memories, her mother was everywhere. The one standing just off camera during her first commercial, straightening her collar and whispering encouragement when nerves threatened to undo her. The one who packed lunches before dawn and stayed up past midnight correcting her lines, determined that her daughter's genius would be protected, never exploited. When producers pushed too hard, it was Brandy who drew the line. When the cameras glared too brightly, it was Brandy who shielded her with quiet, immovable strength. To Jodie, she was not simply a parent, she was the foundation on which her entire life had been built. The voice in every shadow, the anchor in every storm. Even at the height of sudden fame, Brandy kept her grounded. Jodie remembered how no matter how late they returned from set, her mother insisted they sit at the kitchen table for a simple meal. It was her way of saying, "You are still a child, you are still mine." Jodie once recalled. There were songs sung over dishwater, jokes whispered in hallways, moments when Brandy looked at her daughter and reminded her gently but firmly, "Don't forget to be a kid." On Oscar night in 1989, as the world rose to its feet, Jode admitted she scanned the crowd not for stars but for her mother's face, the only applause that mattered. Her father's absence had always been a wound of silence, but her mother's presence was everything, fierce, unwavering, loud in its love. That was why dementia felt so unbearably cruel. It began its theft long before death did, stripping away memories piece by piece until the woman who had once been Jode's compass seemed lost in fog. Jode later confessed the torment. "I was losing her every day, watching the strongest person I knew slip away, and yet I could not let her go." Some days Bry's eyes lit with recognition, her voice calling Jode's name with the same warmth as ever. Other days those same eyes looked through her, as if at a stranger. Each moment of clarity felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, and each lapse cut like a knife. It was, Jode admitted, a grief that began long before the end. When Brandy finally passed in 2019, it was not simply loss, it was collapse. Unlike her father, whose absence had always been an echo, her mother's absence was a roar. The stage suddenly dark, the applause silenced forever. This was not grieving a bond that had never been, it was grieving the only bond that had ever been unshakable. Film sets, award nights, even the stillness of home felt hollow without her mother's presence. "I always miss her," Jodie whispered in ways I cannot put into words. For an actress who had embodied countless women on screen, this was the one role she could not act her way through, the role of a daughter learning to live without her mother's hand on her shoulder. Her soul was being reshaped by the hidden but persistent sadness with each peaceful hour. The absence of the woman who had previously clapped the loudest added a melancholy undercurrent to triumphs. For individuals who have experienced the depths of parent loss, her anguish rings all too true. The dining table chair that doesn't have someone sitting in it, or the phone that you pick up only to realize there won't be anyone there. The rhythmic nature of memory's ability to mend and break. In her time of loss, Jodie became more than just an actress. She became a reflection of herself, and proof that even famous people have a childish side and are inextricably linked to their parents. Perhaps that is the reason her story has such a strong impact. No amount of renown can change the truth that lies behind the Oscars, the praise and the everlasting figures. Those who sustain us will depart from this world at some point. Even the most intense love cannot halt the passage of time. Jodie Foster, who had weathered the tempests of publicity, criticism, and darkness, was now confronted with the storm that was uniquely human, the emptiness that her mother's death had created. Even in this dark place, she discovered a way to shine. For even as it changes us, loss serves as a constant reminder of love's enduring power. Although Bry's voice has diminished, it remains indelible in Jod's story, in every memory, achievement, and scar. Thus, a new chapter was ahead, despite the sadness. A life in the here and now characterized less by emptiness and more by strength, love, and the radiant, subtle beauty that comes from having endured the unimaginable. A daughter who, with each new day, carries the legacy of her mother. Jodie Foster, at 62 years old, prefers the softer light of a life she has carved out for herself than the intense light of Hollywood's limelight. Her abodes are in Europe, New York, and Los Angeles, choosing positions with the deliberateness of someone with nothing to prove, rather than chasing them. She was the proud owner of a stunning Beverly Hills mansion for many years. As of 2019, she had sold the 7,500-foot modernist masterpiece for approximately $15 million, boasting expansive vistas of the metropolis. Prior to then, she had amassed 2 apartments in Manhattan and a Spanish-style mansion in the Hollywood Hills, both of which were intended to be private retreats. She now resides in a more peaceful house nestled in the Los Angeles hills. It is more of a refuge than a mansion. Instead of glistening trophies, it is adorned with books, artwork, and photographs by Alexandra Hyson that shine in the sunshine. Subtle grace has always been more her style. Her small electric car is her preferred form of transportation when she takes to the peaceful streets of Los Angeles, leaving the garages that housed her Range Rover and Mercedes-Benz mostly vacant. Among her many opulent possessions is a seaside home in southern France, where she often takes time out to read and unwind. However, rather than serving as a showcase, even those residences mirror her need for solace. Jod is one of the wealthiest people in Hollywood, with a net worth of almost $100 million. But material prosperity has never been an indicator of her success in life. The goal with each purchase, a home, a vehicle, or an investment, has been security rather than extravagance, a means of creating tranquil areas in an otherwise constantly monitored existence. The real estate portfolio she has developed is not her true prosperity, she claims. Rather, it is the family that dines at her table, the peace of choosing her own projects, and the ability to say no. Alexandra Hyson, her wife since 2014, is the focal point of her life now. The hauntingly beautiful photographs she takes fill their home. They have more than simply a Los Angeles house. It's a home. Her days are now rhythmed by the peaceful rituals she performs on this stage, which doubles as an art gallery and a refuge. Jod leads the dogs on leisurely hikes across the hills as Alexandra brews coffee in the morning, sunlight shining through framed portraits. As the sun goes down, they enjoy home-cooked meals with their loved ones, their laughing filling the air, not for the sake of the cameras but for their own amusement. Charlie was born in 1998, and Kit was born in 2001. They are her sons. Now these young men are forging their own unique paths. Mom is Jod's title, the anchor who protected their youth from the crushing pressures of stardom. Not out of secrecy but of great devotion, she has kept her children's father's name secret forever, determined to let them grow up free of her fame. She has paid schools to stop paparazzi from following playgrounds, used pseudonyms in hospitals so her children could be born peacefully, and more. The unobtrusive pride of a mother witnessing her son's maturation into a man, rather than the attention of the paparazzi, was what truly mattered in 2025. When Charlie gracefully accompanied her at the SAG Awards, she is still very selective in her professional life, using her talent more like a scalpel than a sword. Golden Globe winner for the Mauritanian 2021. She spent months preparing physically to portray Bonnie Stoll's power in Need 2023, which earned her a 6th Oscar nomination in 2024 for True Detective Night Country. She won an Emmy and another Golden Globe. Rumor has it that her upcoming French-language film VP A Private Life, which may be considered one of her most introspective and seminal works, will have its premiere at Cannes. Jod has stopped pursuing relevance at the age of 62. She explains it. Years of self-discipline, including regular swimming, hiking, and yoga, have kept her health stable and her body trim. Instead of giving in to the want to change her appearance, she has let the passage of time leave its mark on her skin. Time writes its tales in the wrinkles of a person's face, she thought to herself. The wrinkles on her face are evidence of hardships faced, storms withstood, and triumphs ardently embraced. They are not imperfections. Her impact goes well beyond her time on film. For decades, Jodie has quietly given to causes that mean a lot to her. Programs for children's health via the Children's Health Fund, cancer research via Stand Up to Cancer, LGBTQ+ rights activism via the LGBTQ+ Fund, and assistance for artists and crews going through tough times via the Motion Picture and Television Fund. She has supported the work of the Go campaign, which helps underprivileged youth all across the world, and has donated her name and money to MFAR, an organization fighting AIDS. Her close associates say that her philanthropy has been steady, substantial, and purposeful, never a show, always a responsibility, though she rarely discusses specific amounts. These days, Jodie Foster is considered an icon in her own right. She is a strong lady who has weathered the tempests of celebrity, fixation, rejection, and tragic loss. And yet she constructed a life whose value was not in the things that were stolen, but in what she herself had made. Surround yourself with love, family, and tranquility. Her Palme d'Or, 2 Oscars, an Emmy, Golden Globes, all of them are works of art. More personal, though, is her greatest achievement. The guts to be genuine, to love without reservation, and to emerge from the shadows after a lifetime of hiding. Maybe that's why people keep reading about her. The story isn't about a perfect star, but about a person who fell, hurt, and got back up again. It's not about perfection, but about resilience. Of all the women Jodie Foster has played on screen, Claire Starling, Iris, and innumerable more, her finest part has never been. Being herself, a strong, independent, and fearless woman, has been the most important part. Leave a tribute to the actress and the spirit she embodies, if her path has affected you or inspired you with her courage. Because Jodie Foster leaves an indelible mark on the world by the example she sets as well as the films she has starred in. Being great isn't about running away from bad weather, but rather about learning to gracefully face it.